Hello there, welcome back to BUD 403 Profiles of Buddhist Leadership course. We are into week 6 now, and we had a fantastic midterm presentation last week with some of you. I'm sure you enjoyed the Zoom session, and I'm impressed with some of your presentations in particular, and with all those presenters in general. Thank you so much for making it happen. As we met online face-to-face for the first time ever, it was a great feeling to see my wonderful class. Now we have a better platform to perform in our finals, right? Please be ready to do your presentation for 7 minutes in the finals instead of 5 minutes in the midterms. You need to do some rehearsal to do your presentation, and within the time frame, and I want you to really learn how to adjust to that skill. Your personality in your presentation, your voice level, and your layout design, etc., and the content can be very crucial factors of a wonderful presentation. Please make sure to send me a 5-page paper before the final presentation. That should be according to a proper academic paper. I'll share with you the requirements of a proper academic paper as soon as possible. You can reach out to me if you have any question. You're welcome to make an appointment with me to have a Zoom meeting if needed. Please double check the weekly folders and announcements for more updates. As for the 6th week assignment, I want you to write a short report on your presentation, at least 1 page, and the contribution of any of the Buddhist leaders who lived after the Buddha, up to 1500 AD something. And we will talk about the modern Buddhist leaders in a later week. So we don't want to talk about that right now. So please read the given reading materials. I do not encourage you to refer to Wikipedia, as it's not recognized by the academia as a reliable source. Okay? So today, let's talk about the great Buddhist leaders after the Buddha's passing away. In order to do that, I wish to discuss about some Buddhist maps with you, to have a little bit of understanding about the spread of Buddhism in the world over the centuries following Buddha's passing away. Okay, now take a look at this map. So here's the epicenter. Okay, so Shakyamuni Buddha, he lives here in the region of Magadha during the 5th to 6th centuries BCE, that is before Christ, 600 years before Christ. And actually Buddhism declined in India, the land of its origin, due to so many reasons, various reasons. You guys are encouraged to read the history of Buddhism there in India and how it happened, what happened over there. And you can see the roots over here, how Buddhism spread to different parts of the globe. Interestingly, although Buddhism lost its original ground, it spread to so many other countries in the world, and particularly this tiny little island called Sri Lanka. And Buddhism arrived there 2nd century BCE. That is way before many other countries had the influence of Buddhism. And this little small country also impacted many other countries, many other countries. And that's really, really important. And you can see how Buddhism went to Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and then those are the actually Theravada Buddhist countries, and over here Indonesia, Java. You can see how Buddhism went actually from Sri Lanka over here to Java, to Thailand, even to mainland China. Buddhism was Buddhist bhikkhuni order was introduced by some Sri Lankan bhikkhunis. So it's interesting. And then also Buddhism had different rules. We can talk about that in a um, different map. And here we can also see Buddhism introduced in China in 1st century CE. Okay, and then Buddhism takes hold in Tibet in the 7th century, way later than Chinese and other countries. And Buddhism influential from 1st to 8th centuries. You can see here this Gandhara, Kashmir, Pakistan, Afghanistan. That is actually part of the Silk Road. You can see the Khotan, and then Kucha and Dunghuan, very, very important cave is there, very important for all the Buddhists. If you are interested in learning about the Buddhist art, history of Buddhism and this particular area, so it's very, very important. And Chang'an, Loyang, and all these places are really important centers of Buddhism those days. You can also see Vietnam, can see Taiwan, and many countries have been influenced. And particularly this part of the world, like South Korea, and in Japan. So Buddhism arrived there 4th century CE in South Korea, and from there it went to Japan. So it has a really remarkable impact on the world map, to say the truth. And then you can also see, okay, let me make it a little bigger. Okay, you can see here, origin 5th century BCE, actually 6th century. So with these different colors, you can see Buddhism. This is the origin. This is a little green color, and then the pink color immediately after that. That is the second layer, 5th century to 2nd century BCE. And here we can see India, Ajanta, Dakshina, and also Sri Lanka, a very early stage. And Sarnath, all these Takshila, this is modern day Pakistan, we can see. And that is the second layer. And then 2nd century BCE to 3rd century Common Era, we can see with this gray color something, and here we can see Kucha, Turfan, Tunghuan, and this Gobi Desert. This is the Silk Road and Yungang, sorry. And yes, so Luoyang, Nanjing, Chang'an, Chengdu, and all these places in mainland China have been influenced during this stage. And Angkor is there is a very famous uh, um, Angkor. There is a very famous Buddhist temple, one of the largest Buddhist temple we can say, Angkor Wat, in this, I think it is Cambodia. Yeah. So and then also we can see the other layer, 3rd century to 8th century. We can see Korea and Japan and also Tibet. They have been influenced. So Buddhism went to those countries and also to Borobudur. There's a very huge Buddhist temple over there in Java, Indonesia. So this is a valid reference, the world of Asian Buddhism. So you can have a look at these maps. Very, very important. And yeah, this map, I also want to talk a little bit about this map. This is a very important one again, because we are going to talk about Ashoka. So, the first Sangha spread Buddha's teaching throughout northern India. So this part of the India, what we call Madhya Desh those days. And so it's not really Madhya Pradesh today, it's a little different. Madhya, so it's like more Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh also can be included later on. But mostly it was Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. These are very important centers at the beginning. And then you can see this little Sri Lanka. Ashoka's son, Mahinda, took Buddhism to southern India and Sri Lanka. He was in Sanchi, that is Bhopal, close to Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. And yeah, so from there he came to Sri Lanka. And then we can also see Emperor Ashoka, who ruled northern and central India in 3rd century BC, helped Buddhism to spread across India. He also sent missionaries into Central Asia. He actually sent many missionaries. And then Buddhism was carried along trade routes into China. It was firmly established there by 1st century CE. So mainland China received Buddhism also very early, 1st century Common Era. So, and you can also see Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. This is predominantly Theravada Buddhist countries. You can see this color, like a little bit like orange color. And then you can see the Mahayana Buddhist countries. Mahayana Buddhism spread to many countries, and especially mainland China, and then Japan, Korea, all these very powerful countries had the influence of Mahayana Buddhism. And also part of Vietnam, you can see part of Vietnam, and actually part of Vietnam also is Theravada, and the other part is Mahayana. So for Theravada, we have Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and also some part of Indonesia. And India, interestingly, is not featured here in this map, but right now in India, this is about the ancient India. So right now in India, there is Theravada Buddhism, there is Mahayana Buddhism, there is also the Tibetan version of Buddhism is also called Vajrayana Buddhism, and there are so many Vajrayana Buddhist monasteries and monks in India too, as a result of Dalai Lama moved to India, and he started living in India in exile. So this part of the map also is important today. Okay, so Ashoka's contribution is really, really important when we talk about I think maybe before going to that, I'd like to briefly talk about the Buddhist councils. We had several Buddhist councils actually so far, and the first Buddhist council took place after 3 months of the Buddha's parinibbana. That is called um, Buddha's passing away, or in Pali it is called parinibbana. And then there were 500 Arhanta monks, enlightened monks, who attended that council under the leadership of Venerable Mahakassapa. And then there was also, that is also called Pancha Satika, because there were 500 monks. And then the first Buddhist council took place 3 months after the Buddha's passing away. That is called Parinibbana. Passing away in Pali is called Parinibbana. In Sanskrit it is called Parinirvana. And it took place at Rajgir, or those days it was called Rajagaha. And right now it is Rajgir in Bihar state. There were 500 Arahanta monks, all liberated or enlightened monks, who attended this first Buddhist council, also called Pancha Satika in Pali. Pancha means 5, Sata means 100. So Pancha Sata means 500. And this particular very special Buddhist council, first ever, was convened um, in order to clear some doubts and some actually accumulate all the Buddhist teachings, because those days there were no scriptures, there were no writing system, and then all the monks, they actually used to learn the dharma by heart. Especially Venerable Ananda was called the treasurer of Dhamma. He had an amazing capacity to learn things by heart. So most of the Sutta Pitaka, and he learned by heart, all by himself. And then King Ajatasattu was the one, Ajatasattu, the son of Bimbisara. We learned about him before. And he was the one who actually patronized this beautiful ceremony for several months. And it took place in Sattapani cave. And the second Buddhist council took place around 500 years after the Buddha's passing away. There were 700 Arahanta monks. That is also called Satta Satika. And the patron was King Kala Soka. And it was held in Vaishali, in an ancient city. And also still it's called Vaishali even today. And in Pali it is called Visala. And even today it's also a part of Bihar, northern India, bordering Nepal. And so Venerable Sabbakami was the chairman or the president of this council. And this council was probably held about 383 BCE. It was called to discuss some monastic practices in particular. So there was some vinaya or disciplinary rules. There was some conflicts among the monks. Remember, at the first Buddhist council, I said before, and Venerable Mahakassapa did not want to change any of the rules, even though they were minor precepts, but he still wanted to preserve them in order to avoid any confusions. And now, after 100 years, they already had some issues. So some of the monks said, okay, we can relax these things. We don't want to, follow all these things anymore. Like, they kept changing. So once you start changing, you don't know where to stop. So you keep changing. It's like you drink a little bit at the beginning, alcohol, and then later on you just keep drinking, and maybe you drink a lot. Something like that. Oh, I mean, maybe a bad example. So whatever. So what's important for the monks? They always were very Theravada monks, particularly. They were very concerned about the Vinaya rules. They say Vinaya is the lifeline of the that is the very lifeline of Buddhism, Buddha Sasana. So it was very important to remember to keep the Vinaya rules intact. And then the third Buddhist Council is very important. It was held in 250 BC in Pataliputra under the patronage of King Ashoka. Everyone, I hope you also must have heard about King Ashoka. He was a tremendous contributor, patron towards Buddhism. And this particular council was presided by Arahanta Moggali Puttatissa. The third part of the Tipitaka was coded in the Pali language. This council appears to have met to compose commentaries on the Tipitaka. So by now, all the entire Pali Tipitaka was composed, complete, and everything was finalized by this time. And then there are other uh, councils also afterwards. Like Fourth Buddhist Council was held in 72 AD at Kundalawana, Kashmir. It's very, very important. It was presided by Venerable Vasumitra, while Venerable Asoghosa, very, very erudite monk, very scholarly monk, he was his deputy. This council was held under the patronage of Kushan king, Kanishka, Kushan Empire. And by now, Buddhism was also divided into different sects like Mahayana and Hinayana or Theravada or early Buddhism, whatever they call it. And then there are some parallel Buddhist councils that we need to talk about a little bit because by that time, actually, in Sri Lanka, there was another Buddhist council. That time, uh, this happened during uh, King Vattagamini Abhaya or Valagamba. And during that time, there was a famine. There was some South Indian attacks on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was constantly under attack from South Indian kings. And so that time, around this time, still, so far, the monks have been learning and practicing and also preserving the Dharma by oral tradition. They learned it by heart, and they carried forward by heart. And when these kind of enemy attacks and also the famine and all the stuff happened, the responsible monks, the leaders of those days, all those monks decided we can continue like that. So it's time for us to do something to preserve the Dhamma, and they started writing. So that happened very, very early, like first century AD in Sri Lanka. There is a cave called Aloka, a cave temple called Aloka Vihara in Matale district. Even today, there is a huge a bunch of rocks, and it is said the monks all wrote. There were 500 scribes. They were writing the entire Pali Tipitaka on palm leaves, and then it is said they deposited in the Mother Earth's womb, like they buried for the preservation. That is the natural preservation those days. That those ancient people, that's how they preserved things. And so this is an important part. And then again, we had another Buddhist council, and that happened in Myanmar. That actually happened in 1871, Myanmar or Burma. It happened in Mandalay under the patronage of King Menden. It was presided by Jagara Bhivansa and Narinda Bhitaja. And they are very respectable and senior monks in Myanmar. And then there was another Sri Lankan monk called Sumangala Sami, Venerable Sumangala. During this council, 729 stone slabs were engraved with Buddhist teaching. That's a very important time. And then the Sixth Buddhist Council is a very famous one. It was held in 1954 in Burma again, at Kaba Aye Yangon. It was held under the patronage of Burmese government, and it was presided by Prime Minister U Nu. The council commemorated 2,500 years of Buddhism. Very, very important. All right, so I also want to talk about the short history of different Buddhism in different countries. So, in order to do that, I would like to start with this particular man, king called Ashoka. And Emperor Ashoka, he was also called Emperor Ashoka because he had a comprehensive reigning power, mostly all over India and in some part of other. He had an extensive territories attached to him. And some of those contributions of King Ashoka is really, really important. And because he also established some very, very important rock edicts. And his edicts are really important for the history of Buddhism. These things can be really important. This is King Ashoka, and Ashoka actually lived from 268 to 232 BCE, and he lived and that was he was the third ruler of the Indian Mauryan Empire, and the largest ever in the Indian subcontinent, and one of the largest empires at its time. He became a model of kingship in the Buddhist tradition. Under Ashoka, India had an estimated population of 30 million. That is much higher than any of the contemporary Hellenistic kingdoms. And after Ashoka's death, however, the Mauryan kingdom or Mauryan dynasty came to an end and its empire dissolved. And at the beginning, Ashoka ruled the empire like his grandfather did, and efficient but very cruel way. He used his strength in ancient Indian warfare to expand the empire and created sadistic rules against criminals. A Chinese traveler named Huang San, um, he visited India for several years during the 7th century's Common Era, and he reports that even during his time, about 900 years after the time of King Ashoka, Hindu tradition still remembered the prison Ashoka had established in the north of the capital of Ashoka's hell. That was called Ashoka's hell. Ashoka ordered that prisoners should be subject to all imagined and unimagined tortures, and nobody should ever leave the prison alive. That was the kind of man he was at the beginning. But he completely changed after Kalinga War. Kalinga was the worst thing. And the disaster in Kalinga was supreme. Around 300,000 casualties. The city devastated and thousands of surviving men, women, and children deported. And what happened after this was very important, subject to numerous stories. But he could not live comfortable life. He could not sleep properly, and he had so many struggles. And then eventually, he turned to the Dharma. He turned to the Buddha, and he followed Buddhism, and he really enjoyed his life and kind of paying back to the country, to the society for what he had done. And after the war of Kalinga, Ashoka controlled all of the Indian subcontinent except for the extreme southern part, and he could have easily controlled that remaining part as well, but he decided not to. Some versions say that Ashoka was sickened by the slaughter of the war and refused to keep on fighting. So that was the reason, and he wanted to be more peaceful towards the rest of his life. And this is an ancient Ashoka rock edict, Greek and Aramaic inscription. And this is, so there were lots and lots of Ashoka inscriptions like that. And it's also very important when we look at the historical proofs. For example, in Lumbini, in Lumbini, in present-day Nepal, very close to the North Indian border, and there is an Ashokan pillar which says, "Hida Buddha Jate Sakya Muni." Here was born the Shakyamuni Buddha. So this is a very important historical um, fact, historical document that we have. And then later on, United Nations, they also found out some very ancient ruins underground over there, and some layers of stuff found from that place. So eventually, UNESCO declared it as the birthplace of the Buddha. So this King Ashoka's contribution and his support for Buddhism and his missionary activities are really very, very important in the history of Buddhism. And so one of the most important things that he did actually was to convene, he patronized the Third Buddhist Council. And during that time, after that he also sent some missionaries to different countries, and different countries, even to the Far East um, of Arabian, what we call Yona Kadesa is Aparanta Kadesa. They were like Far Eastern countries. And Yonaka is actually used for Muslim countries. Um, and Yonaka is a word that we find, and it's the Far Eastern Arabian countries, and there were monks or missionary monks who were dispatched by King Ashoka during his time. This is very, very early too. And at the council, as I mentioned, he sent Moggali Putatissa was the chief of the council, and he deputed Madhyantika Thera to Kashmir and Gandhara, and Mahadeva Thera to Mahisa Mandala, and Rakita Thero to Vanavasi, and Yonak Dhamma Rakita Thero to Aparantaka. See, this Yonak Dhamma Rakita, he definitely must have had some roots from the Arabian um, countries, and so he was sent to Aparantaka. Aparantaka is Far East. And that is the Arabian countries. And the Marakita to Maharashtra, and Maharakita to Yona Loka. Again, he also was sent to the Middle Eastern countries. Majjhima to Himavanta, and Sona and Uttara to Suvarna Bhumi. And Suvarna Bhumi also is regarded as Myanmar. Mahinda Thera with Uttiya, Uttiya, Sambala, Bhaddasala, and Sumana Samanera. They were sent to Sri Lanka. And so establish ye in the delightful land of Lanka, the delightful religion of the vanquisher. And that is the message of King Ashoka when he sent missionary to Sri Lanka. So the mission to Sri Lanka is a very, very important landmark of Buddhism again. It's a small country, as I mentioned here before, but it turned out to be the headquarters of Theravada for many centuries. And the kind of contribution from Sri Lanka towards Buddhism is undoubtedly very, very crucial. And even today, everywhere in the world, when they talk about history of Buddhism, this small, tiny little country, island, is always mentioned. And Venerable Mahinda's connection to Sri Lanka is again very important. And he met actually the king of the country. And then first of all, he met King Devanampiatissa, and he convinced him, and then he also talked about how he came from India, and then he wanted to propagate the Dhamma in this island nation. And also, I want you to remember that Sri Lanka was located very close to India. So in historical accounts of the country, like Mahavansa, the chronicles of Mahavansa and other documents mention that there was Buddhism still. Some of those people who traveled to Sri Lanka as traders and all, they also brought Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So it was there, but officially it was introduced by King Ashoka's son, um, Arhanta Mahinda. And that time, King Devanampiya was the ruler of the country. And interestingly, we celebrate Venerable Mahinda's arrival to Sri Lanka on this upcoming full moon day in June. So we have some events in our country, our temples, and in Sri Lanka, it's celebrated all over the country for the arrival to pay respect to the Venerable Mahinda for his introduction of Buddhism, introducing of Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So King Ashoka, he also sent some presents and also the following message. He says, Ahang buddhancha dhammancha sanghancha saranangato upasakattang vedesi sakka Sakyaputtassa sasane Twampi imani ratanani uttamani naruttama chittang pasada niyatvana saddhaya saranang vaja. So King Ashoka had a very good friendly relationship with Sri Lanka, and he had a very special affinity to this country, and so he sent his own son and later on his own daughter, Teri Sangamita, also was sent to Sri Lanka. And the meaning of this message is, I have taken refuge in the Buddha, his doctrine and his order, that is the triple gem, Buddha Dhamma Sangha. I have declared myself a lay disciple in the religion of the Shakya son. Seek they know best of men, refuge in these best of gems, converting your mind and with a believing heart. So this message was of Ashoka was conveyed to King Devanampiya in the month of Poson actually, and it was the full moon day of the following month, what we call Jetha in Pali and Poson in Sinhala. And that Venerable Mahinda fixed for his arrival in Sri Lanka. Among the companions of Venerable Mahinda, as I mentioned before, there were elderly monks, senior monks, Ittiya, Uttiya, Sambala, Bhaddasala, and also a novice monk, Samanera Sumana. They all came along with Venerable Mahinda. And later on, Venerable Mahinda, he met King at this happened in 236 Buddhist era. So 250 BCE, and Mahinda and his companions departing from Vedisagiri, and it is said actually they came by air. It is said like they were using their mystic powers as great arhants, very powerful monks, so they could travel like that. And then it is said they met in Hintale, 8 miles east of Anuradhapura, the ancient capital of Sri Lanka. And the first meeting of the king of Lanka, and then Venerable Mahinda graphically described the chronicles of Sri Lanka. And then Mihintale Hills, even today, is very important place of Buddhism. And there are a lot of temples and so many monks everywhere um, in this part of the country. And Venerable Mahinda, when he came to Sri Lanka, his first expression was Samana Mayang Maharaja Dhamma Raja Savaka Taveva Anukampaya Jambu Deepa Idagata. We are the disciples of the Lord of the Dhamma. In compassion towards you, Maharaja, great king, we have come here from Jambudipa in India. And then having heard and having exchanged greetings and introducing himself as the son of King Ashoka and already exchanging the gifts and the messages of the king and all these things. And then king was actually convinced. He became a Buddhist. And later on, Sanghamita, the sister of Arahanta Mahinda, also came along with the Bodhi tree, a sapling of the Bodhi tree. And this is one of the very, very earliest Bodhi trees in the world. And so Venerable Mahinda had a lot of connections with the kings. See, they are from royal family, so it was easier for them to comfortably communicate with the ruling people. So king himself was convinced, and his ministers and influential people in the royal court, they were all immediately following this beautiful religion. And then when Theri Sanghamita came, Queen Anula herself desired to be a nun. And so in Sri Lanka, the first nun was the queen of Queen Anula of King Devanampiya. And this is also very important. And then there were many Buddhist nuns afterwards. And interestingly, these two siblings, Venerable Mahinda and Venerable Sanghamita, they did not go back to India. They stayed here. Until the rest of their life, they lived here, teaching and propagating and establishing Buddhism in this very important country. And the arrival of Bodhi tree also symbolically very important. Even today, this particular Bodhi tree is there in Anuradhapura, and it has been preserved by all the kings in the country. And whenever there is a new king, or even today a new president or something, and they always go back to Sri Mahabodhi tree and they pay respect. And the firm establishment of the Buddha Sasana, the Buddha's order in this country is very important. The first ever temple or the stupa or the chaitya, that is called Thuparama. And the first ever temple built in Sri Lanka is also called Mahavihara. Mahavihara later became the headquarters of Theravada Buddhism, a very important Buddhist school. So progress of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, ever since Buddhism was introduced by Venerable Mahinda to Sri Lanka, Buddhism became the most dominant religion in the country. And even today, vast majority of the country, they are all Buddhist. And there are thousands and thousands of Buddhist temples. And even some of the Chinese traveling monks like Huan Sang and Fa Hien and even some other travelers like Ibn Battuta, they all visited this country, and they report um, very early, and they reported that there were, for example, in Anuradhapura city itself, that area itself, there were some temples with 8,000 monks and 5,000 monks and 3,000 monks, and so it was huge. And 60,000 monks, it is said, they were in Sri Lanka those days. So the influence of Buddhism um, and the powerful establishment and the patronage of the royal kings are also very important. And later on, we also find Mahayana influence in Sri Lanka in Anuradhapura period. And during that time, especially Jetavana Monastery is kind of a Mahayana headquarters, arch rival of Mahavihara, very close to Mahavihara. Even today, if we go to Anuradhapura, you can see ancient ruins, and they are very huge, very huge. And we can see very old ruins, and we can imagine the kind of monks, the number of them who were living in those beautiful, very huge monasteries over there in Sri Lanka. So it's very important. I want you to remember some of these names like King Ashoka, Venerable Mogali Puttatissa, and Venerable Mahinda, and Theri Sangamita. They are very important figures. And King Devanampitis of Sri Lanka, and many other monks are also important. And then let's talk about history of Buddhism in China. So throughout Chinese history, Buddhism and Chinese Buddhists received mixed support and also persecution at times from Chinese rulers, with some even going as far as to destroy temples and scriptures in an effort to eradicate the religion. Many things happened, but Buddhism somehow survived, and some of those dynasties, different dynasties, some of the rulers, emperors, they were helping Buddhism. They were patronizing Buddhism those days, and many monks were produced, and scholarly monks were produced, and so many things happened in China. And one of the largest Buddha statues and very huge caves and Buddhist art and contribution of Chinese Buddhism is tremendous in the history of Buddhism. So Chinese scholarly monks and their paintings and arts and sculpture and all the stuff, really important. Particularly during the Qing dynasty, that is 221 to 206 BC, Emperor Qin Shi Huang banned all religion and forced the adoption of the philosophy of legalism. And so that happened. And the first evidence of Buddhist scriptures in China can be traced back to Han Dynasty. That was 206 to 220, 206 BC to 220 AD, almost 2000 years ago. Buddhism was merged with the native Taoism and folk religion. So before, when Buddhism was introduced to China, there was already Taoism and Confucianism. And during Han Dynasty, two natural land routes into China from Buddhist regions existed. These were the Silk Road that ran through Xinjiang and the tea house tea horse road through Yunnan. So these are important. And then following the fall of the Han Dynasty, the dynasties that followed adopted their own religions and had different degrees of contact with Buddhists in Central Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Various sects and schools of Buddhism were developed in these countries, and their teachings were adopted by Chinese Buddhists to form modern day Chinese Buddhism. So in China, the main schools of Buddhism, actually Pure Land Buddhism, Chang School of Buddhism, Tian Tai School of Buddhism, Huayang School of Buddhism, they are very important. And very important Indian monk called Bodhidharma, um, his, he is one of the earliest monks who came to China and helped establish Buddhism in China and translating and many things. And Bodhidharma's contribution to Buddhism in Chinese history is very important again. And Shaolin Monastery, for example, is very famous. And Bodhidharma traveled to China to visit the Shaolin Monastery. He was asked to leave after he criticized the monks and their practices. And so things like that happened. And Bodhidharma spent 9 years meditating in a nearby cave, and eventually the Shaolin monks became so impressed by his religious powers that they kept him back into the monastery and started following his teachings. Yeah, so you can find some important Chinese Buddhist scholarly monks like Huan Sang and Fahian. They have also been traveling to different countries, especially they went to mainland China, from mainland China to India and even to Sri Lanka, and they wanted to learn the Dharma and come back to China. Many people, those days, the Silk Road, so far and so long distance, and also many, many difficulties were there. And some wanted to come to China, from China to India, and some could never make it. And on the way, they died. And somehow they made it to India, but they could not go back to China. It was so hard, not like today. It's just a matter of few hours today by air, but those days it was days and weeks and months of journey. So many hardships. Yeah, it was like life threatening, but such dedicated monks were there, and they came back. Still, they traveled, mostly walking by foot. They they had the courage, and they were very determined monks, powerful monks. We really pay respect to such wonderful people. Because of them, we could, they could share, kind of bridge the gap between India and China, and the knowledge was shared by them. Really important contribution. So you can find more details about those wonderful Chinese monks, temples, and Buddhist leaders, and some of those great kings. Uh, please have a look. And then Buddhism in ancient Korea also is important. And Buddhism in Korea, Bulgyo, was introduced by monks who visited and studied in China, and then brought back various Buddhist sects during the Three Kingdoms period. It became the official state religion in all three kingdoms and subsequent dynasties, with monks often holding important advisory roles in governments. Korean Buddhism came to be much more inclusive than in other cultures, with significant attempts made by important Buddhist scholars to reconcile the many diverging branches of the religion. Buddhism would have a profound influence on Korean art, literature, and architecture, from bells to pagodas, ceramics, sculpture, and even developments in printing techniques. Yeah, so, and then Buddhism was also introduced to China, ancient Japan, via Korea in the 6th century CE, Common Era, with various sects following in subsequent centuries via China. It was readily accepted by both the elite and ordinary populace because it confirmed the political and economic status quo, offered a welcoming reassurance to the mystery of the afterlife, and complemented existing Shinto beliefs. Buddhist monasteries were established across the country, and they became powerful political players in their own right. And Buddhism was also a key driver in fostering literacy, education in general, and the arts in ancient Japan. So I think it's also very important to remember that there was a war between Korea and Japan, but Korea introduced Buddhism to China, actually, to Japan. Now, so I think it was a wonderful present, a gift from that countries, and Japan was influenced so much after that, and Japan also adopted Buddhism very strongly, and so Buddhism was introduced into Japan in either 538 or 552 CE from the Korean kingdom of Baekje or Baekje. It was adopted by the Soga clan, particularly, which had Korean roots and was practiced by the significant Korean immigrant population in Japan at that time. And Buddhism received official government support in 587 CE during the reign of Emperor Yomei, 585 to 87 CE. Even if some aristocratic clan groups opposed it and still adhered to purely Shinto beliefs, somehow Buddhism reinforced the idea of a layered society with different layers of social status, with the emperor very much at the top and protected by the four guardian kings of Buddhist law. So it's important to know the relationship between China, Korea, and Japan, and the connection was actually Buddhism. It was really very powerful, and these countries have been tremendously impacted by Buddhism, and their contribution towards Buddhism by way of so many different temples and producing wonderful, great Buddhist scholars, and also building very ancient temples. For example, in Nara, I have also visited Nara, and I have visited some Korean Buddhist temples. I remember an ancient Buddhist monastery. I had some wonderful time in Songwonsa temple and some other Buddhist temples. I had the good fortune to visit Korean and Japanese Buddhist temples. I would really love to go to China to see some of those wonderful, wonderful Buddhist temples and maybe learn more. Also, very wonderful people, and learn more about those their practice. That would be very, very useful too. Yes, so I think I would like to wrap up today with these notes, and I would like you to uh, have a good look at any of these countries. You can learn about the Buddhism in Thailand. Very, very wonderful again. Their contribution to Buddhism. An amazing country, Thailand, and so many wonderful kings and followers and Buddhist scholars and so many monks even today. One of the most powerful Theravada Buddhist countries today is definitely Thailand. Thailand. So Thailand's contribution to Buddhism was also very important. And uh, these Theravada countries, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, they are they have a very close nexus, very close affinity, thanks to Buddhism, and also with Cambodia, Laos, and other Buddhist countries too. And also from the very beginning, we also had very special relationship with Chinese governments and Sri Lankan Buddhism and also Chinese and Sri Lankan ruler. Although it's a small country, but somehow we had a very special maritime spot, and Sri Lanka also was very famous for spices, and some of those maritime traders from far east and far west, they always wanted to um, do some merchandise, do some business with Sri Lanka. And some of the biggest ships also arrived in Sri Lanka those days, very, very early days, like thousands of years. And also we had a lot of gems, precious stones, and even today they are very famous. This country is very famous for um, um, blue sapphire and ivory products. Sri Lanka has, is said to have had some 20,000 elephants those days. And nowadays, of course, just a few thousands, not so many like before. And so there were a lot of things happening. Spicy land, um, precious stones, and very, very, so many natural resources. And then Buddhism and wonderful people. If you have any plan to go visit those countries, um, all these countries are really nice. You can learn a lot of things and so many beautiful places, even in India, for you to visit. And all those Buddhist places, Buddha Gaya, and then Kushinagar and Shravasti, and also back to Mumbai, very wonderful Buddhist caves like Ajanta and Ellora, and Sanchi in Madhya Pradesh, and yeah, so many places, beautiful places. We can learn many things from by traveling and also learning by seeing those beautiful places. It makes us so better, and especially for us, if we go to those Buddhist places, we feel like honored, kind of blessed. And yeah, I had the privilege to study some years in India, so I'm really happy that I could visit those places and learn so many things. And also, I had a short visit to Japan and Korea. I'm very happy about that too. I also had the chance to go to Taiwan. Taiwan also had beautiful temples, and there are very wonderful establishments and great monks, great monasteries like Suchi and Fo Guang Chan. They are doing wonderfully well. And yeah, maybe I am planning to maybe visit mainland China, those beautiful places. Also, Giant Buddha and yeah, Sichuan. Yeah, some of those places would be very nice to visit. Okay, and I would like you to go have a look at the study materials that I have provided and um, do um, some assignment work, do some studies on them, and then yeah, write a paper on that. Okay, with that we conclude today, and thank you so much, and see you again next week. Okay, have a wonderful week to all of you. Thank you. Bye bye.